Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be taking a look at the winners and losers of day one of NHL free agency and free agency so far. Now, we've already seen tons of big deals, and even though we have a couple of players still left that are pretty big like John Klingberg and Nazem Kadri, most of these teams' off seasons, or at least their free agency signings, are pretty much done. So throughout day one, what were the best moves and the worst signings, and which teams got the best and the worst of day one of free agency? Watch till the end for all the picks and all the free agent talk. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of you guys aren't subscribed. So if you like hockey and if you like draft and trade rumor content and free agent content, this channel is the place to be. But let's start off today with the fifth biggest winner of the 2022 NHL free agency day one period. And I got 5 winners and 3 losers to talk about in today's video. Let's start off with the 5th biggest winner, and that in my opinion is the Detroit Red Wings. Now to me, the Red Wings just did a solid job overall, especially in this last day of free agency. We knew they needed to go after potentially another centerman, maybe add another forward, and they pretty much did that amazingly, with Andrew Copp being signed to a 5-year, around $5.25 million deal. Pretty solid for him, and considering how much he's done with the Rangers, considering how well he can fit into a middle six role, I think you put him alongside Lucas Raymond, that could really work out well, or we could put him with another forward that they'll sign later on. You of course got Ben Chiarot, who also got a big deal for himself, 4 years at 4.75, I believe, but around that solid range. He's going to be a player that's a really big wild card for me. When he was traded to the Panthers, he wasn't really all that great, and this last year, just in general, wasn't all too great. I feel like he's a player that has that playoff pedigree, but again, didn't really show up for the Panthers in the regular season, has been one of the worst analytical defensemen in the entire league. Obviously, he can bring some great physicality, but to me, it'll be interesting to see what the Red Wings use him with, how to deploy him, because I think his skating and his just overall quickness is just not there in a lot of key situations, but maybe he's the defensive defenseman alongside Moritz Seider, and that's how they kind of play it. But we'll see how it works out. But even though I don't want to doubt Steve Yzerman, I would say that's definitely the worst contract of the day for the Red Wings. As for the other deals, we got Dominik Kubalik with a 2-year, $2.5 million AAV with him going to the Red Wings, which I think is interesting. You already have Philip Zadina there as a kind of one-dimensional, younger goal scorer there, with Kubalik kind of being along the same lines. This last year for Chicago was pretty inconsistent, and it was pretty garbage for him all around. And I feel like with a new situation in Detroit, maybe with some more power play time, Kubalik could turn a page. Then we also got, in my opinion, the best Red Wings signing of the day in David Perron, a 2-year, $4.75 million deal. Absolutely amazing, in my opinion, to get Perron around that range. To me, he's worth $6 million and probably would have gotten like 3 years, in my opinion, heading into this free agency, but only a 2-year deal, and at $4.75 million, to me, it is the best deal for the Red Wings in this free agency so far, with what he's able to bring in terms of that feistiness, in terms of that goal scoring ability, that overall offensive game. I think he'll play perfectly with this Red Wings team and bring some good experience as well. And again, alongside Andrew Copp, I think that could be a pairing that we could potentially see, and I think both of those guys as pretty nasty players on that second line works out pretty well for them. They also got Matt Luff and Austin Czarnik, but besides that, I think the Red Wings did quite well. But now let's go on to the third biggest loser of this 2022 NHL free agency. And you know what? Next up, I'm going to move on to a team that missed out on Johnny Gaudreau right at the very end. And next up, I'm going to go to the New Jersey Devils. For the third biggest loser, to me, when it comes to them, they didn't do enough outside of losing Gaudreau for them to worthy warrant being outside of this list. They got Brendan Smith for 2 years, $1.1 million per. And I think the Eric Haula trade could be solid for them. But at the same time, I think they could have had a much better free agency. We could have seen them go after a guy like David Perron potentially, or some other forward, especially on that wing side. And to me, even though the Eric Haula trade is, I think, a decent one for them, was how little Zacha was really producing for them this last year. I feel like now that they lost out on Gaudreau, they're big fish. There's so little options left for them that I just feel rather disappointed with their free agent in general, especially considering other East teams like the Ottawa Senators have built up so much, especially over these last couple of weeks. Now let's go on to the 4th biggest winner of the 2022 NHL free agency day one. Next up, I have the Colorado Avalanche. Now to me, I think the Avs did really well considering their situation. Now, could they have signed Kemper? Sure. Could they have signed Kadri? Sure. He's still in the market, though, and we could see maybe a potential Kadri signing while they also get rid of Samuel Girard. I think that's still on the table. But just with the deals they made, I really like them, honestly. You got Artturi, Lehkonen, at a 5-year, $4.5 million per year average. And to me, that's pretty amazing for what Artturi Lehkonen has brought for the Habs and the Avs, how clutch he's been, and especially in bigger situations and with much bigger sample sizes, how good he's been as a goal scorer and overall player. You also got Josh Manson being brought back, which I think was a super underrated deal for them. 4 years at $4 million, or at 4.5 at an 18-year million deal for 4 years. To me, with Josh Manson, he was a really big wild card for the Avs coming into this free agency. Whether we would see him be brought back, there was reports of him going back to Anaheim, and that would have sucked, I think, for the Avs. But I think bringing back that entire defense core, bringing back everybody, and having Manson a part of that is such a huge thing for them. And even though you could make the case he might be a little bit overpaid, still, he was amazing with the Avs in the playoff run, and considering how good he was with Colorado, if he continues that, this deal looks like an absolutely great one. Then, of course, got the Valeri Nichushkin deal, 6.1, 2.5 million AAV on an 8-year deal. To me, that could age pretty well if Nichushkin stays healthy and if he plays and that intense game that we know and love from him for the next 8 years. To me, 6.1, I mean, he's worth about 7, maybe even 7.5. You really want to go crazy with it right now, with just how valuable he was in the regular season and how valuable he was in the playoffs. Plays an amazing playoff game, plays great in the regular season too, and that could be a really interesting one as well. But overall, for the Avs, I think they did a solid job, but signing the big guys that they needed to sign was a priority, and they got more guys back than I thought they would have. I thought Kemper would have been gone, I thought Gaudreau would have been gone. I thought even potentially we could see Manson gone, but he stays, and I think that's a big keep for the Colorado Avalanche. Next up, though, I'm going to move on to the second biggest loser of the 2022 free agent period, and now let's move on to the Philadelphia Flyers. Another team that lost out on Gaudreau, and again, just like New Jersey, it was one of those situations where, in my opinion, losing out on Gaudreau, having that as the big fish for them, really just kind of dampened the rest of their free agency. Now, apparently, Chuck Fletcher said that they were never in on him to begin with, which is lying, let's be real here. But they probably ended up knowing, probably had the situation where they knew that they weren't going to get Gaudreau and ended up going for a couple other signings. They get Nikolai Delorier, who signs a 4-year, $7 million contract, as well as Justin Braun for a $1.75 million contract for 1 year. This to me just screams, it just screams desperate, and especially with the Delorier signing. I mean, he brings a lot of intensity, can fight, and can also skate okay, but he's the type of player that I feel like they weren't going to sign if they still got Gaudreau, and now that you don't have Gaudreau, now that you don't have that potential franchise face, I just feel like this Flyers team has just a great chance of falling on their face this next year. To me, I think they needed to improve that defense, and even though Braun being brought back is solid, he's not going to revolutionize that defense core. They still have drastic issues defensively, and to me, unless you get an absolutely marvelous year out of Carter Hart, the free agent signings they've gotten are just rather disappointing for what the Flyers were trying to do, and especially trying to give up JVR. I mean, they never ended up trading him, and that was a piece that we were trying to see being traded to get some cap relief to eventually sign Gaudreau or some other player, but still no trade on that, and it looks like they might not be trading him after all, which would be pretty disappointing for the Flyers. But moving on to the third biggest winner of the last day, day one of free agency. This might be a little bit biased, but you know what? For my favorite team, I think they did fantastic. At number 3, I'm going to move on to the Dallas Stars. Now, the Stars didn't do too much on paper. They signed Mason Marchment, though, to a 4-year, $4.5 million deal, which I think is perfect. If Marchment plays like he did this last year at Florida, that is going to age absolutely beautifully. Brings intensity, brings solid speed, great ability, and good net front presence, and a strong defensive game, too. And you put him alongside Ben Sagan, and that's the top 6 winger the Stars were looking for this offseason, and they get it there in a beautiful signing, in my opinion. You also got Colin Miller on top of that, who I think would be is a really interesting depth signing for the Stars. On that right side, you're probably going to have Heiskanen, Hakanpää, and then Colin Miller. And I think as a puck-moving, decent defensive player, he can still provide quite a bit. But to me, the question is just the health. How many games does he play with the Stars? And that'll be something to really keep an eye on. But to me, it was also what they didn't do. They didn't sign John Klingberg to this huge deal, this 8-year, probably $7.5 million deal. And to me, that was the biggest biggest issue. That was the biggest worry. I love Klingberg, but it just felt like for this team, they needed to move on, and they did in a great way. Marchman is a huge addition, though. And to me, just considering the options they could have gotten, they could have traded for Jeff Petrie, they could have traded for Josh Anderson, but they didn't. They went for the smart pick in Marchman, and I think it'll really look like a solid deal, especially after next season, where I think he's going to gel pretty solidly. Next up, though, going to the biggest loser, in my opinion, of free agency so far, let's move on to the Calgary Flames. Now, here's the thing. Losing Gaudreau is a humongous blow for the Flames. One of the most valuable players in the league last year, and they might have still made the playoffs without him, but it would have been close. Gaudreau was such a big part of that Flames offense, and just how solid of a 5-on-5 team they were, and you take that out of the lineup, and it's just all destroyed. And we've heard reports as well that Matthew Tkachuk might want out of Calgary now that Gaudreau is gone. And that completely blows up what they've been building, what they've been trying to build. And you go on top of that, the signings they actually made instead of Gaudreau. Trevor Lewis, Dennis Gilbert, Kevin Rooney. I mean, these are guys that are going to be depth players at most. The biggest signing they made was Kevin Rooney to a 2-year, $2.6 million contract, 1.3 per, and that was the biggest guy you could get so far instead of Gaudreau. And to me, it's just a shame. I mean, obviously there was nothing that seemed like the Flames could have done in that Gaudreau situation, but what they did afterwards was pretty sad to see. But now let's go on to the second biggest winner of the free agency so far. And now I'm going to go to a team that, for me, I really only loved one piece of news, one signing, but it was so good to put the Sens over the top. At number 2, I have the Ottawa Senators. Now, obviously, the big one is Claude Giroux. And I don't know why this page is taking forever to load. But the biggest one was Claude Giroux, 3 years at $6.5 million per. And I absolutely adore this signing in every single way. The term is perfect. The AAV is perfect. I was expecting Giroux to get 4 years, maybe around $7.5 million per. And the Sens get him at what seems like a pretty massive discount for how good he can be offensively. But off the ice, this represents so much for the Sens and such a big leap for them. Having the ability to sign a big FA like Claude Giroux is something that I would have never seen happening like 2 years ago. But the fact is that this core is so enticing, is so interesting, and for Giroux, he wanted to join it, I think speaks volumes to what this Sens team is building, and just that sign, just that fact of Claude Giroux joining the Sens team willingly, I think is such a big step for this Sens franchise and a huge one going in the future, especially when they want to sign more free agents on top of that. And of course, they got the pretty big trade as well, where they got Connor Brown, or they ended up giving away Connor Brown to the Caps for a second-round pick in 2024. Not the most value that I think he should have gotten in Connor Brown, but at the same time, it was a second-round pick, and it felt like for the Sens, Connor Brown was just on his way out eventually. A solid player, though, and definitely a good addition by the Caps. But to get a second-round pick for him isn't the worst thing in the world. But I think for the Sens to add Giroux to get a second-round pick is not bad value whatsoever. Next up, though, let's go on to the biggest winner, in my opinion, of this 2022 free agency, and that is the Carolina Hurricanes. After being one of the biggest winners of the draft, in my opinion, they are the biggest winners of day one of free agency. A lot of big deals, and really only trades, really. I mean, when we look at things, of course, they had the Tony DeAngelo trade, but that doesn't really factor in. But they did get the big deals of Brent Burns and Max Pacioretty. And considering the value they had to give back, it was pretty much nothing for them. And they basically use these guys as almost free agent signings. The Canes would get Brent Burns and Lane Peterson for the Sharks for Lorenz, Makianemi, and a conditional 2023 third-round pick. It's absolutely nothing. And it's exactly what you want to give up. And the Sharks retained 33% of that deal, which is miraculous for Carolina and an amazing deal by them. To add Brent Burns, who's still pretty athletic, still solid at this age, and can bring so much offense, especially on the power play in terms of the goal scoring. To me, that's a big addition by the Canes. And you also get Max Pacioretty for free. Future considerations for Max Pacioretty and Dylan Coghlan, who could fit in to that Canes bottom pair potentially if there are to be some injuries, and maybe even if they're healthy. You get Max Pacioretty for free, one of the better goal scorers, more efficient goal scorers in the league. And if he can stay healthy, he has 1 year left, and there's no risk there for the Carolina Hurricanes. So you get Brent Burns, and you get Max Pacioretty, and you also sign Ondrej Kase to a 1 year, $1.5 million deal. To me, so much to love with this Canes offseason so far, but especially those two trades were absolutely marvelous. But those are my winners and losers for the 2022 NHL free agency so far. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, what you guys agree and disagree with, and who would you say were the biggest winners and losers so far of free agency? Let me know your thoughts down below. Of course, comment all your thoughts on the free agency so far. Share this video with friends. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and also click on this card for all my trade number content right on my playlist. I will see you in the next one, though. Goodbye.